Joined by Jeff Smith and Lyle Randolph. They are here representing the Kellerman Foundation and a big event coming up on November the 7th. It is the U.S. Grant Symposium. And Jeff, you're the chair of the event on the 7th. So tell us just real quickly here about the 7th, some of the details, if anyone is interested in showing up.
So this is a free event to the public, and we have three dynamic speakers that are going to come in and talk about the legacy of Ulysses S. Grant in specifically the Southeast Missouri region, something that I'm a lay person. I didn't know anything about this before, and now I'm just a local guy getting involved, and we're going to try and educate people more about it.
And Lyle, you are one of the three speaking, is that correct?
Yes, I will be one of the speakers, and I'm honored to be really in great company. I don't feel necessarily deserve to be with some of these other gentlemen. We have some wonderful speakers coming, but I will be talking really more about the local and regional connection of Grant to Southeast Missouri, his impact, and really what was going on in Cape Girardeau and then the counties of the Boot Heel and what was then a swamp.
Can you give us a little bit of that insight? like what is that connection with Grant and Southeast Missouri?
Yeah, so you think about that when the war began, U.S. Grant was working in his family's leather shop up in Galena, Illinois, and essentially he volunteered to round up troops for the war effort and was a colonel, and eventually made his way into Missouri. He was stationed at a couple of places really quickly in Jefferson City, but then down to Potosi. And so in Potosi is when he actually became aware that he was going to be promoted to a general. And so soon after Potosi, he made it to Cape Girardeau. And so really he was being tested as a general for the first time. And he really had a conflict at the very start, and it wasn't with the opposing force. It was with another general that felt that he had seniority over Grant, and that was General Prentice. He was already in the area. He thought that he had already been acting as the commanding general of the region, but in fact, Grant did have seniority because he had previously been an active officer. And so that conflict that happened here in Cape Girardeau was kind of the launch of Grant's career. But the piece that I really want to talk about is really about the what was going on within the communities of Southeast Missouri at that time. And so Lincoln had been elected in 1860, and he was a Republican, and this was a strongly Democratic area. Most of the folks were from the South, had come from Tennessee and Virginia and North Carolina. And so they had strong Southern sympathies. We had a small group of German settlers. They were more progressive, and they supported the Republican Party, but they also were anti-slavery. But they were a small portion of it. But in general, most people in Southeast Missouri didn't want conflict at all. But at the same time, you had forces on both sides that really didn't let them choose that path, that effectively you found yourself in Southeast Missouri being forced into the conflict. And that's really what I want to talk about, is that the area of Southeast Missouri during the early part of that war just kind of became a real challenging for Grant, because it wasn't like when you would go into the South, you would have direct you understood in Alabama and Mississippi that you were facing a direct enemy. Here, you didn't know who you were dealing with. You didn't know where their sympathies lie, if they really truly were, a Union supporter or a Southern supporter. And so that created an environment that was certainly challenging. And the person I'm going to be speaking about is M. Jeff Thompson. He was the Brigadier General of the Missouri State Guard. So it was the state troops that formed to challenge the federal coercion, as they called it. They refused to provide troops to the Union, and so the federal troops came into St. Louis, and then eventually down to Cape Girardeau, and they fought with against Brigadier General Jeff Thompson, who became known as the Swamp Fox, because he was maneuvering around the swamps of Southeast Missouri.
So for Grant, then, as you mentioned, you said, I was thinking it, and you said it, that there's a bit of a divide in Southeast Missouri. Was he trying to win people over one way or the other?
Yeah. Well, his first goal was tactical, though. His first goal was to control the river. And so quickly they moved to control Cape Girardeau and Cairo. And even in southern Illinois, that was primarily a Democrat area too, so a lot of strong southern sympathies even there. And so he knew that they needed to act fast because those could have very easily fallen into under southern control, or and at that point it would have been a completely different outlook for the war in this area. At that point, with control of the river, then they could start focusing on the battles that came after that, which were some of the really significant ones, Shiloh, and then again going down to the river and control the river. But so that quick action on Grant and the Federals' part early in the war really helped solidify that position. So that put the other forces, the Missouri State forces, in a different type of situation. So they then focused on kind of irregular guerrilla war tactics, right? So they became really a force that would strike and then retreat back into the swamps, and they could hide. And it was really problematic for Grant because he didn't have a enemy that he could directly face.
Sure.
And so it was a situation, though, where also they had control of Cape Girardeau, but if you got outside of Cape Girardeau, even to Jackson, over in Jackson, Missouri, which is just a short distance away, but there the neighbor versus neighbor, you didn't know where the loyalties would lie. And so one day you may go and it may be in control of Southern forces. And so, well, who do you support today, right? But then when you leave, the federal forces will show up and ask, well, did you provide them any support? If so, I'm going to take you and I'm going to put you in the military prison. Now, the other way, if the some of the what they called bushwhackers, the guerrilla fighters, came in the next day after they'd seen you serving dinner to the Union forces, well, they may just take you out back and hang you to a tree. So those were the kind of dynamics that happened in southeast Missouri. And that's really why I became interested in that history, because in the official history book, if you look and see what happened in southeast Missouri during the Civil War, they're going to say not much happened.
Right.
And the reason is that those histories were written, the big histories were written within 20, 30 years, really within a generation of the Civil War, and they wanted to forget about those things that happened. They wanted to forget that someone that may have been a newspaper editor got thrown into prison, or someone else that was seen as a prominent citizen was called a guerrilla murderer and hung on in downtown Cape. I mean, those are the kinds of things that were occurring that made it really challenging. But I think that history definitely needs to be told. I think that one of the speakers is going to speak about the Battle of Belmont. So are you familiar with where Belmont is? Belmont, Missouri?
Not heard of it, no.
No. So it is in southeast Missouri. It's on the bend of the river kind of northeast of New Madrid, south of Charleston.
Okay.
But it was General Grant's first real battle. So it was his first success, although it wasn't a great success, but he did essentially accomplish his goals. But that happened on the soils of southeast Missouri. Now, Belmont doesn't exist as a community anymore. There's a little marker there, but we're here also to promote things that happened that were part of that history. Here we're talking about certainly a president that is kind of revered as one of the great presidents, and his start really came from southeast Missouri.
So some of the, if you live in the area here, you hear about his time here. Well, where did he stay at? Where did he go? Will some of those facts be laid out or myths be busted as to where his time was really spent while he was here during the symposium on November the 7th?
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things. We hear a lot of rumor, and part of that is sometimes challenging to exactly nail down some of those details, because when you think about, well, where did Truman stay? Well, what does that mean? Where did he sleep? Where was his headquarters, or where was he at most of the time he was here? And
right.
I think all three of those are different questions, right?
Sure.
So what I think that ultimately you find is that where he would have stayed, like the St. Charles Hotel no longer exists. It's where, it's at the corner of Themis and Main in downtown. But you also have, where was the headquarters? Grant was known to drink a little whiskey. Where did he spend most of his time? Was at neither one of those places. Right?
Sure.
he had places where he would like to go and have a drink. But he also was not just here the one time. He came in late August and for just really a couple of days, late August into early September of 1861, and really got launched the fortification of Cape Girardeau. So all the Fort D, the Fort A, and Fort B and C as well. And he laid out that plan and got the troops working on that. And then he returned a couple times to check on that to see how that went. So he was here multiple times, didn't necessarily stay overnight the other times that he came because he was based in Cairo. But he was here multiple times, so there are reports of people seeing him at other times in official reports where he came and reported on the developments.
All right, Jeff, November the 7th with the U.S. Grant Symposium. What does that day look like? Tell us where it's at, the times,
Yeah, sure.
and if you want to be there, how do you do that?
So the location is called the Kellerman Lorimer Hall, and that was the old city hall here in town. So if you're familiar with it, the official address is 401 Independence Street, and it's just at the top of the Hill of Independence. And that starts at 9 a.m. We have 3 speakers. So we have a gentleman named Kurt Fields, who's kind of a reenactor, if you will. So he looks and presents kind of like Grant would have. And then Lyle's going to give us, he hasn't given you too much of his information yet, but he's going to speak about another neighboring town a little bit further over from us that was one of the significant battles. And he gave us a snippet just a few weeks ago, and I'm already fired up for his talk. But so he's our second speaker. We'll have a lunch break. And then we have our keynote speaker. His name is Louis Picone, and he will speak, I think, pretty much about Grant's Tomb as his topic. So he's going to talk a lot about Grant's Tomb, which is, I believe, in Manhattan. It's up in New York, but after he served as his presidency. But for me, being a local Cape guy, I just have learned all of this recently because I volunteered to help chair a symposium, a talk about this, and all the history that's happened in our town. I mean, I'm a 5th-generation Cape Girardean, if that's a word, and didn't know all this stuff about Ulysses S. Grant. So, yeah. We're going to hopefully share that with everybody.
And I think, is this website correct? usgrantsymposium.org?
That is correct.
All right.
That's where if you want to register for the event, there's a menu at the top right of that screen when you go to usgrantsymposium.org. And you'll register there. We can hold up to 160 people, but if we get more coming, we'll find a space for you, I promise.
Have we had anything like this come together in a while?
That's a good question. This started a decade and a half ago, I believe, and it's been sponsored by the Missouri Humanities Council out of St. Louis. And one year they decided to host it in Cape because it's closer to where all the action was, right? So even though they were hosted out of St. Louis, they said, let's get down into that region. And it was one of the largest attended events. So as it's progressed, they said, hey, all of the stuff that you talk about when Grant was moving around pretty much happened in your neck of the woods. So this is our first inaugural one. I'd like to mention, too, Dr. Frank Nickel, who was a historian at the university and was recently passed. He was a wealth of knowledge, and he has so many artifacts and things that he's collected over the years that we're pulling those out of the file cabinet and out of the storage boxes, and we're going to get those out where we can touch and see and understand more about all of that history that happened here in Cape Girardeau just a little while ago.
All right. Again, November the 7th. That's, again, starting at 9 a.m. It is usgrantsymposium.org. Any final thoughts?
I will just say that one of the things we're going to focus on was mentioned. There was activity in Fredericktown, Sykeston, Charleston, Bloomfield, Potosi. All those areas are around us, and so that's really what that I will be focusing on is that conversation about Southeast Missouri and the impact that Grant and the war had in our local history.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. Again, it is November the 7th, U.S. Grant Symposium. Go to usgrantsymposium.org, 9 a.m. Jeff, Lyle, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.